Welcome everybody. It's 3:00 on the East Coast, noon on the Pacific. Welcome to Boroughs and Burbs number 86, The Marble Show. That's my co-host Roberto Cabrera at our West 78th Street, New York City headquarters.
75th Street.
75th Street.
Brown hair Stevens.
With inflation, I guess I bring it up to 78th, and next week you'll be 81st Street. I want to begin the show by thanking our sponsor, nonprofit organization close to my heart, Grace Farms. You'll find them at gracefarms.org. They are home to Design for Freedom, which is relevant to this show. Design for Freedom is an initiative to end forced labor in the materials that go into our homes, offices, public spaces. And so we're going to talk more about Design for Freedom later on, but it's part of their mission for the ethical sourcing of materials that go into construction. How can you help? You can go to Grace Farms. You can see what they're all about. 100% of the profits from any sale at the gracefarms.org website for coffees and teas goes directly to supporting Design for Freedom. Listeners of this podcast enjoy a 10% discount on their first order. So go to gracefarms.org and enter the promo code BURBS and share in something greater today. That's their new slogan, share in something greater today. With that, let me begin by introducing Peter Prvulovic. Peter Prvulovic.
You got it.
Of the Vermont Quarries Corp. He is the maker of famous Danby marble in Danby, Vermont. Hello, Peter.
Good afternoon. How are you?
And I'm showing your website briefly. We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
I also want to introduce Joe Marotta, who I have known since he was an upperclassman and a football star in high school, at New Canaan High School. But that's not why we brought him here today. We brought him here today because he is at Everest Marble, a wholesaler of fine stone. Say hello, Joe.
Hello, nice meeting you all.
And he's also Scott Hobbs, who's also on the show, classmate. So I think Scott played football with you, yes?
I learned a lot.
What is it about football players that they go into the building trades? I don't know.
Don't you?
We're a bunch of tough guys, I guess.
You guys were classmates?
Yes.
Actually, yeah.
Oh,
Joe was a year older, as it shows.
I am a year older, actually. You graduated a year behind me, yeah. So we were in high school together, though. So that was a great thing.
We've always held you in high reverence, Joe. So why don't you kick
Thank
off
you.
the show and let's talk about how we conceived of this show. You said that you were, a few years ago, you were on the fabricator side of the business. Now you're in the wholesaling side of the business. What does that mean?
Okay, well, fabrication is the ones that here in what I do today as a wholesaler, I sell directly to the fabricator. The fabricator ends up taking responsibility on cutting the material and installing it in the customer's house. We're a raw materials is what we do right now. Fabricator will end up coming out to the house and templating the area, the kitchen, or what vanities, whatever else they need to do. Then they'll bring it back, and our material will be delivered from our wholesale facility here at Everest to the fabrication shop. Now, we only deal directly with fabricators. We do not sell to the public or to the trade, only because of fabricators prefer to take full responsibility when it comes to material and inspection and offloading from our trucks, which makes total sense, especially when it comes to an insurance situation. So we leave it at that. But that's the connection. When I used to do that years ago, about good 10, maybe 15 years ago is when I owned a manufacturing shop and decided to come into the wholesale industry, which is what I'm doing today. And,
being a wholesaler, you own the stone yard with all the material in it, or in the case of right now, you're in a stone warehouse full of material.
Full of material. There's probably about, the warehouse is about 26,000 square foot warehouse. And it houses about, I would say, close to $4 to $5 million worth of material because that's a lot of medium to high end. A lot of it is marble. That's one of the things that we import from all over the world, not just from the Danby Quarry, which is a great marble, by the way. There's quartzites here, very few granites. We're not a granite company. Among a few other things such as engineered material, which people are still looking into and installing in their house. So we do carry that. So we import and we buy blocks, and that's one of the things that we're going to discuss, with the Danby Quarries and Peter. We actually did a trip just recently and purchased blocks of material of Imperial Danby, which is being shipped here in the next week or two. So customers can come in and hand select and view and touch and put things on hold so that they can do their homes and their kitchens in.
And it's shipped to you as a block?
Well, no, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. We purchase blocks, and then when we prove the block, and we do this not just with Danby, but when we go to Italy, Turkey, Greece, we also have men on the ground that will actually inspect materials in those locations and look at the full block. And a block could be like 10 feet long, about 15 feet wide, and 6 feet tall.
Wow.
And they slice it like a loaf of bread. But we end up looking at the block to make sure that the inspection is right, like in terms of fissures or veins that we may not like. Once we approve the block, it goes into production, which is what Peter facility does. And they cut it, slice it, 1.25 inches and 3/4. And sometimes we do specialty orders, which is 2-inch thick, depending on the job and the project. So and then it comes here sliced and all polished or honed. We select a finish to it, and it comes here and it looks like this. This is a block of marble, and it's sliced, and you can all see that, correct?
Yes.
So that's Carrara from Italy, right there, white Carrara, and this is another block, Golden Sunset. So they slice them, and they all are identical. They need to be identical because when they need more than a couple of slabs, 2, 3 of these, they need to match so that the kitchen flows and the veins flow together and the seams look right. And that's how we are.
Is there ever a scenario in a block where there's a pocket of air, or not air, but like you slice through it and all of a sudden, there's a crevice that's just because you can't see it and it's dead center. And as you slice it, you identify like a hole. Does that ever happen, or is it always solid?
Pretty solid. I've never had an issue. Only time there's an issue is when there's a drill hole that we're not aware of and it shows up. But other than that, am I right, Peter? I mean, I'm gonna make sure that when it comes to the blocks.
So when it comes to the blocks, to answer
Peter,
Roberto's,
introduce yourself first, please.
So it's Peter Prvulovic from Vermont Quarries. We're the quarriers and manufacturers of the Danby marble. The quarry's been around since 1850s. It's a very historical place. There's a lot of history that lives and breathes in that place as we speak. And a lot of your New York City is basically built out of Danby marble. So New York Public Library is literally built out of our material. And as you go around, I can name projects left and right in the New York area, but we don't have enough time for that. You will notice our material all around. To answer your question, Roberto, do you ever find a void in the middle of the block? Very seldomly, not in marble. Once in a while, a travertine, which is a different type of stone, yes, you can find a pocket that's open. What we would find, for example, in Danby is, and it's not a secret, the way the veining moves throughout the block and throughout the actual quarry wall, we will get into the softer and harder parts. We will get into lighter veining, darker veining. So, it's very popular these days for customers to choose material that is, let's say, a little bit, I don't want to call it cleaner, but less veined. So we'll know exactly where to quarry and what portion of the block we need to take out in order to facilitate those slabs. What we do is, as Joe was saying before the material actually gets to a place like Everest marble, we'll quarry it from the nature, number one. So we have specialty machinery that we use to cut blocks. We are very different than your standard quarry in the fact that we're underground. So we quarry and manufacture all our materials inside of our quarry. We're underground for the 99.9% of our production. You'll see if you travel throughout the rest of the country here in the States, of course, if you travel in Europe, you'll see many quarries, which are what we call the open face. So basically you will have a large quarry that you're just taking out an entire wall. So we are a little bit different in the fact that we're going inside the mountain to obtain the material. We'll quarry blocks that are generally about 10 foot, 6 by 6 foot by 6 foot. And as you saw in the one image at the beginning of this page, we'll have a loader go in, grab an entire cube, take it out, and bring it up from production. Now, that cube is never perfect. That's one of the pieces, that we'll take to our next facility, and we'll trim down to your point. If there's voids or pockets, you can even see in this picture, there's a vein that's a little bit darker.
Yeah.
We will flip that block on on one of the sides and slice that vein out. And it's only because of the current market requirements.
So
There's
I'm
nothing wrong
assuming,
with that material.
I'm assuming there's some sort of grading scale, right? Like a diamond is cut, clarity, and color or whatever. Is it the same with the grading for the marble?
It's very similar. I'm not going to say it's the same. One thing that holds very true for natural stone in general, it's the beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's one of those things. There is obviously if there's a large crack, if there's a fissure in the material, yes, it's a little bit of a lesser value material. But overall, generally speaking, you will have sound material. But just because it's sound doesn't always mean that it's appealing to everyone either.
Yeah.
Joe mentioned they were just at the quarry last week or 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
Before I make the phone call, I already, kind of prepare myself, and I know that what Everest is looking for is not necessarily what another client's looking for. So there is a grading system within several different steps. There's a grading system in the blocks, there's a grading system in the slabs, and then there's also the grading system within the customer itself. Meaning a customer in New York area might not be purchasing or obtaining same material that a customer in Midwest. Not because of the price point, not because of what they're looking for, but the simple look of the material.
Does the grading though dictate the price?
Yes.
Absolutely. It's like with anything else. So you have to remember, we quarry a large amount of stone to obtain about 30% of usable production.
Let's quantify a lot. I think you said it was 250,000 tons per year.
It's 250,000 cubic feet.
Cubic feet.
So it's 250,000 cubic feet per year that we will quarry out of our mountain to obtain 30% for production. And then out of that 30%, you're still not talking everything for a customer such as Everest, who's a wholesale distributor. Some of it might be going to a cut to size project. Some of it might be going to tile projects. Some of it will be going to slabs. And then there's a portion also, we are one of at this moment, the only company that's actually specified for marble to be obtained for monuments at the Arlington National Cemetery.
That's what I was going to ask you. You sell to any artists who are just going to carve it up?
So that's another one. We do have more and more requests for our material for carvers. And then what we're seeing really a growing trend right now is actually landscape architecture. So that's another
Peter,
portion of our.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, when we talk about different projects such as the exterior, that's where the less attractive material could be used in terms of the 30% blocks are obviously used for cutting slabs and what we buy. But the rest, if it's Is that something that you can say that that's how it operates?
No, actually, the 30% is between everything, Joe.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
30% of obtainable material is what is deemed for cut to size projects, whether it's interior, exterior,
Okay.
slabs, tiles, for everything that we do. And again, it's just a question of what is currently requested by the market.
Let's start with that. 10 years ago, I built a house. I was going to open houses and I saw a kitchen and I said, what is this? And they said, that's a Danby marble kitchen island. And I said, I want that. So I went back and so I think it begins with either the decorator shows the client a couple of samples. This is what a Calcutta looks like. This is what a Danby looks like. Or the client sees what they like in a magazine, perhaps, or they see it like I saw it on an open house, and they ask for Danby marble. So Danby is a place in Vermont, the town of Danby, Vermont. It's a quarry, but it's a brand name. And so people are asking for Danby marble. You explained to me that they're asking for it in the eastern half of the United States, primarily. It's known as a brand name in the eastern half. It starts with the decorator or the client, and they say, I think I want Danby marble. Then they told me what my budget was for my kitchen stone. And they said, you get $20,000 of budget for your kitchen stone. And the kitchen island in Danby marble is roughly $10,000. And I was like, it's okay. That's what I want. Now, I only had a Danby island. They said, you really want harder stone, like absolute granite, black granite for the countertops that get really abused. You wouldn't want to have marble everywhere, John. And so I got talked into a combination of marbles for different surfaces. So I then went to the wholesale place. I went to a place like Everest Marble, and I got to pick out my slab. Is this a typical experience? Is this what most customers do? They go visit Joe at the wholesaler with their decorator and they pick out their slab?
Yes, they do. I mean, I can answer that because that's what we do on a daily basis. For instance, I have a slab of Imperial Danby right here. I'm going to switch it around. That's Imperial Danby. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's it. That's what people will do. They come into this facility and they would look at material and hand select this and say, I need 3 of these to do my job. And that's when we would put them on hold, and with the customer's information, with the designer's information, telephone numbers, and who the manufacturer will be, which is the fabricator. That's when it gets sent to the fabricator to work out pricing and to determine for sure whether they need 2, 3, or 4 slabs of material. That's how we operate. And that's how people would come here and select. From that point on, then it goes into the customer's hands, and that's when they decide whether they move forward and contract with the fabricator. And then we are told to ship the material with a PO.
By the way, that's the best part. We did a gut renovation of our apartment like 15 years ago, and going to the stone yard to pick it was like looking at pieces of art. It was awesome. That is the best part. Then you have to pay for it.
Well, you're like a kid in a candy store.
Correct.
Yeah.
So let's look at, so now I want to mix it up a bit. I'm going to hit share screen and I'm going to show off a screen of the $41 million townhouse that Roberto just sold in Manhattan, because it's got this fabulous white marble bathroom. I say that because we're doing a show on white marble because the very best properties use extensive use of white marble. And the white marble they choose is brand name marble. So when I said to Roberto, and when I asked Joe and Peter, what is this? They look at this and they know immediately which quarry this is from. So where's this marble from?
Well, it's statuary white, and it's from Italy. That's typically where I get my statuary white from, as well as Calcutta gold. So, Yeah.
So is Calcutta Gold or Statuary White, two other brand names, are they coming out of Carrara, Italy?
Yeah, the thing is the Carrera quarry is massive, and a good chunk of the material, I would say, I'm going to use the number 70% or maybe a little more, is white Carrera, and that was the slabs that I showed you in the beginning. And from that same area in Quarries, then you find a diamond in the rough, which is the Calcutta families, and then that's where gold and gray veins are mixed into it, and that's when the price starts to go increase because and actually we end up, unfortunately, the way it is today, we end up having a bidding war. If the block is very good, you end up paying for it, and it has nothing to do with color, has nothing to do with veins, it has to do with supply and demand.
Who's the bidding war? You go over to Italy
Yeah.
and say, I'll give you $10,000, and somebody raises their paddle and says, no, I'll say 15.
Occasionally, yes, that happens, and we do have our relationships. It's not that doesn't help, and the relationships say we'll save you this block, but they get what they want for it because it's very hard to mine, and especially the Calcutta families. Just so you know, when people come here, a lot of these whites that you see are all Calcutta based materials. And this is a typical Calcutta. It's called Calcutta Gold. And you can see some gold in it. And this is what people are coming to view when they want a marble white with veins and gray and gold. And I'll just show you one more, which is very nice. This one here.
So what's
is,
the difference between Calcutta and Danby? I'm a Danby man.
Well, Danby, well, I'm going to let him explain that.
Roberto's a Calcutta man, clearly.
Well, there's, Calcutta marbles Danby is a very durable marble. That's one thing that people that come here to view marble and want something with that's durable without having to worry about stains and etching and scratching. And that's what happens with a lot of the marbles, unfortunately, because they're soft. And we do educate our customers. We give them an education on what to expect and the maintenance that would be needed when you put a marble in a kitchen.
But they're not all equal. You're saying
No.
the Calcutta and the Danby are not the same in terms of wearability.
And now I'm going to have Peter to explain to you why Danby is such a durable material. So
I think we lost him momentarily. Keep going.
All right,
Talk to me
maybe
about
we'll-
absorption.
So the absorption is a lot less when it comes to water absorption is when we're talking about absorption. And it could be anything else, a glass of wine, you name it. In a marble, what ends up happening is if it's not properly sealed, which today's day and age, we have so many sealers that are incredible. They've come a long way when it comes to sealers, and it buys you a significant amount of time so that therefore if it's glass of wine does spill, you have enough time to pick it up and without having to absorb and go through into the marble. And these sealers
Can we talk about the sealers real quick? Back in the day,
yeah.
when we did it, there was a product called Bulletproof that we did. And
Yeah.
then someone said, you only have to do this every 4 or 5 years. And then I talked to somebody the other day, said, no. You need to do this once every couple of months.
Well, that's
How
not
many
true.
kids do you have?
A lot of
What
good
are you
drinking
drinking?
wine.
How much do you drink?
But seriously, so how often should something be treated?
Well, that's a good question, but I really can't answer it fully. Only reason why is because I don't have the knowledge of all the sealers that are out there today. However, there are sealers that are out there that need to be placed in the fabrication shop. These are people that need to be trained on how to apply it, that give you a 10, 15-year warranty. And you pay for it, but it really does absorb and it fills in all the pores in what marble has, a lot of pores. And that's the reason why it starts to stain. So these sealers do go a long way. There's many of them. And what you were talking about, Bulletproof, it's from Stone Tech. I'm familiar with it. There is another one out there that gives you a good 10-year from what I understand. But that requires some time and overnight sealing and leftovers. So and 2 or 3 coats need to be applied before it gets installed into the customer's house.
Okay, so let me ask you just one more question, just from a
Sure.
standpoint of care. My counter is starting to just get dulled, right? It's dull and in a lot of the usable spots. The backsplash is still polished and beautiful. Can I have someone come in and just
Yes.
repolish it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yep. Restoration company.
And then you have to seal it again.
Correct. What
Correct.
they'll end up doing is they'll come in and they'll typically what we recommend for any marble, I always tell our customers that you may find a material that I have here that's polished. However, we always tell the customer, I think it's best if you consider and talk to your fabricator about this, that you hone it. Honing it minimizes a lot of the etching. It's not 100% effective. Now, etching is different than staining. Let me explain. What happens is if you spill lemon juice on a polished marble, it's it. That polish is off. You see a splatter that you'll never be able to get rid of unless somebody comes to the house and redoes your countertops. But when you hone it, it's a good 80 to 90% effective, meaning that it won't be as noticed as much compared to if it was a polished. So by honing it helps minimize a lot of that etching, looking at etching spots. That's why we recommend honing, number one. When it comes to restoration companies, yes, they'll come out and they'll re-hone and clean and pull out, they'll take out spots of stains with certain poultice materials, chemicals that will suck out the stain. They'll re-hone it and then reseal it again. And it looks pretty much like new.
Is that
Peter,
an
we were
expensive
talking about
process?
the
Sorry.
difference between Calcutta and Danby. I said, I'm a Danby man. We didn't get into absorption levels yet.
So-
Can you put some specific numbers on the differences between the stones?
Absolutely. So the absorption rate, your typical material that you obtain from Italy, whether it's the statures or the Calcuttas, you're talking about a absorption rate of 0.13 to 0.18, which, it's typical. Your Danby materials are 0.06 to 0.09. So in some cases, they're half or a third of the Italian materials. Now, what does that mean for a homeowner? It doesn't mean the material is not going to etch or it's not going to stain. It's just going to take a lot more to do so. So if if Roberto spills his red wine and he wipes it up, it's not going to affect it as quickly as it would a Calcutta or a statuary. Now, if you leave a red wine and there is, if you leave a glass or a bottle and there's a little bit of seepage on either or, and you leave and you go on vacation for 2 weeks, so you come back, you better believe it, there's going to be a ring on your countertop. The only great thing about natural stone in general is that is still something that you can fix and get rid of. It's not easy, but as Joe was mentioning, there's maintenance companies out there that'll come out and they can take care of that. So the one great benefit to natural stone is the fact that it is actually refurbishable. You can reuse it for other properties if you'd like to. You can re-hone it, you can repolish it, you can repurpose it in many different ways. Roberto, going back to your question about the sealers. So as Joe was mentioning, there's so many on the market right now that you really wouldn't even know where to start.
Mhm.
But you also want to keep in mind too, is you don't want to seal and overseal your counters either. Because at some point you're just building up this layer of, I don't want to call it film, but close enough on top of your counter that it's not going to serve any purpose. But going back to absorption rate again, go ahead, sorry.
So I want to turn to Scott Hobbs and Pete Mikulski, both of whom are building houses right now for clients that use a lot of stone at the very highest level. And so I want to understand where the trends are going. I want to understand, one, are people asking for Danby versus Calcutta? I mean, do brand names matter? What's the budget? I think Scott said it's not uncommon for a client to have $1 million stone budget for their project. So I want to understand, are they price sensitive? Are they brand sensitive? Do they care about absorption rates? I want to understand from both Scott and Pete, who represents Wadia Associates, what the very high-end customers are looking for in stone these days. Scott?
I was gonna pass to Pete first, but I think we're privileged to work with a lot of the very top interior designers and architects, and a lot of them have visions as to what they want, and they work with their clients to figure out what's the right thing for themselves. A lot of the time, people do keep a little bit of concern under, how far out do I want to go? Because there are some pretty interesting, really wild stones out there. And that's great if you like it. But, if you sort of look back in time and you think about like the pink Pepto-Bismol bathrooms, people like that at a certain point. That was high fashion. And with stone, they sometimes, there's some stuff we walk in on going, boy, I'm so happy you love this. And I think it'll get ripped out the first time that the house changes hands. And you're not sure how it'll last over 15 or 20 years.
But who's making the choice? Is it always the customer, or is it sometimes their decorator?
It's the customer in conjunction with the decorator. I think most architects and designers will insist that their client has something to do with the selection, even to the point of going and choosing slabs. Because I think Joe had brought up originally, or it might have been Peter, or just brought up that it is very personal. And I can look at one slab and say that veining is just spectacular. It speaks to me. It's awesome. And the next person goes, oh, it's the worst thing I've ever seen in my whole life. And it's tricky. The exact slab matters in a lot of materials. Some are very consistent. You don't need it as much. And then meanwhile, there's a whole lot of materials out there today that are much better price points, which are especially good inside of secondary areas. So I don't see that inside the high end. I don't see clients sacrificing inside of their kitchens, their master baths, their feature bar or whatever else. But you will see substitutes going into secondary bathrooms, kids' bathrooms. And again, there's some pretty cool stuff out there if you choose the right stuff. And that's not inexpensive. It's cheaper than some of the original stone if you're okay with it. Sorry, Pete, I spoke for a while.
No, I'm in agreement. I think a lot of times it comes down to aesthetics, and the client will be guided. They'll get a guiding hand from both the architect and as the specifier, and the designer as the person looking at the final aesthetic. We try and take into account like how much light is getting into the room, how much you'll actually see from the detail in the stone and things like that. So there's a lot that goes into it. We do make sure that every client goes and sits in front of the slabs and looks at it. We get samples and we have them actually take it, and we attach things to it so that they can sign off on it, so that they know this is the actual stone that they selected and what they've signed off, because we'll then compare that at the end to make sure that they can see it.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that $30 million project, and you say, and $1 million of that is stone. They don't come back and say, cut my stone budget. They say, if they want to cut the budget, they look for something else. The stone matters. Yes?
Absolutely. For something like that, yes.
It's the last thing they cut.
But with the exception of that, you prioritize. I mean, sometimes things start out and the guest bedroom is, the guest bathroom is spectacular and awesome. And when you get the $1 million number, maybe you tune that down a little bit in order to, the guest bathroom might be something different. At the same time, there are people that will absolutely spend for every single space in the house needs to be spectacular.
Does anybody marble a ceiling?
Oh, yes. I can tell you a couple of jobs that we've been on that were the entire shower, walls, floors, and ceiling is all 2 cm thick marble.
Wow.
So they do exist.
So can I ask you something? I was looking at like where marble is quarried, and I see Greece, the US, Spain, Romania, China, Sweden, Germany. None of it really, maybe India, but I don't see anything really from like the Southern Hemisphere, from South America, from Africa. Are there quarries there? And I guess the second part of this is, geologically speaking, is Europe different from the US, which is different from what you're going to find? Like generally you can say it's softer there. It's redder there. I mean, it's more veined in this, what can you tell me about that?
So you're absolutely right. There's a lot of marbles all over the world, or a lot of stone all over the world. Southern America is very rich in granites, and what's now more popular, which is the quartzites. And the quartzite is just a harder marble, for lack of terminology. But there is definitely a different geological belt throughout the entire universe, if you would. For example, the material that we quarry is actually spreads from as far up as Maine and as far south as West Virginia. It's all one same belt of marble. However, it goes a little bit differently. I mean, obviously, if it passes here through, New York City or New Jersey, you're not exactly going to go and open up a quarry in those areas, because it's just impossible to do. So you do have to have certain areas where you have actually access to the material that you can go in and take out without harming other portions of the hemisphere, if you would. Southern Americas are, like I said before, very popular and very rich in granites. Most of them, are still used on an everyday basis. As Joe mentioned before, they don't do much in granite, but if you go back late 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't really that much marble on the market. It was mostly granites. That's what was
Correct.
known. That's what everybody was doing in their kitchen countertops and for every other application, if you would,
Or
in their
quartzites,
homes.
for that matter, as well.
Quartzites is,
well.
yes, quartzites now are getting more and more popular, and they do tend to come from different parts of the world, including Southern Americas, and Brazil being one of the richer ones. I'll give you a perfect example of, lapis lazuli, which is one of the most expensive materials in the world, to my knowledge. That comes out of Chile. It's but what makes it so expensive is not only the color of the blue background that it tends to have, but there's a lot that goes into that extraction and transportation of the material to get to that point into slab form, just because of where it's located.
So let's
It's,
talk about geography a little bit more. You said to me that your Danby is primarily sold into the eastern half of the United States, primarily in the northeast of the United States and Florida, which I think is interesting, because on the Boroughs and Burbs, we track the fact that New Yorkers go to Florida, and then when they work on their second house, they ask for Danby marble. And so Danby follows them down to Florida and to Hilton Head and to places where New Yorkers go. When I said, well, what about in Atlanta? You said, no, they're picking Southern marbles in some of the Southern
That's
states
true.
because they're
Some of
local.
the Southern states, exactly. So you have to remember, Danby's been around since 1850s. The quarry has been in operation since 1850s. It was from 1870 to roughly about 1970s. It was owned and operated by Vermont Marble Company, who basically at that point in time, more or less owned majority of the quarries in the Northeast and countrywide. So our sister company, Colorado Stone Quarries, out of Marble, Colorado, was also at one point owned and operated by Vermont Marble Company. So with that being said, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when all this building and development was going on in New York City, we were one of the main building products. 1903, New York Public Library was basically, blocks were shipped from Vermont, from various quarries in Vermont, including the Danby, the one that we operate now, to New York, where it was cut on site and then installed as a building block. It wasn't used as a cladding. It wasn't used as, something that you just put on the wall. On the interior, the exterior and the interior are both the same material. Those pieces are 8 to 10 inches, some cases 14 inches thick. But with that being said, as that movement was happening, so to speak, and people were building and finding out more and more about marble, they wanted something local, and that's what was available. Danby was very popular back in the early 1900s for various projects. And I think, and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but majority of the people that purchase Danby are usually very happy with it and tend to go with it again. There is, from a salesman point of view, there's nothing ever worse than walking into a distribution place. And I know this doesn't happen at Everest, but there's many others out there where somebody will turn around and say, I'm here to look at my marble for my kitchen countertop. And the salesperson from that company would say, well, no, you don't want to use marble for your countertop. And me being a visitor, trying to sell more material to them for this particular purpose, is like, wait, let's back up here.
That's
So
exactly
the
what they said to
reason-
me. They said, you do
Yeah.
not buy marble for your kitchen. And I'm like,
For
but,
kitchen.
yeah.
So here's something really just very simple to remember. If you are willing to grow with your stone and let your stone be part of your life, there's nothing wrong with it. You're not going to destroy it. Apart from taking a hammer to it, you can't break it. I mean, it's 1.25 inch thickness is the standard. But to just back up a little bit, as far as your original question, we tend to be very strong in the Northeast for a couple of reasons. One, we're local. So you take a company like Everest, they were there last week, approved the block that we had cut for them. Now we're going to finish it and we're going to ship it, and it's going to be shipped and delivered to their facility within less than 7 business days. As opposed to a material that's coming from overseas, whether it's coming from Italy or Brazil or wherever, it might be 2, 3, 4 months before the material actually arrives. So number one, we're close. Number two, we do produce roughly 15 different varieties of marble, all Danby. Unfortunately for us, everyone in the market still kind of knows Imperial Danby and Olympian White Select. Here and there, people start realizing the name of Mountain White and Montclair, but those are all different layers within the Danby quarry. So I think the variety and the fact that, as I believe Scott was mentioning before, you might go in and obviously Imperial Danby, Olympian White Select, which are cleaner, whiter materials, they're going to be more expensive than something like a Mountain White or a Montclair. So a homeowner might go in and say, okay, well, I want Imperial for my kitchen, the spotlight of the actual home, and I'll use something like a Montclair in a bathroom or, secondary bath and so forth and so on. The other reason, or the third reason that we're very strong in the Northeast is, again, the fact that we can service very easily, not just a distributor like Everest, but also when it comes to larger projects, an architect and designer have the ability of coming to our facility with their distributor to look at the material. So when you start talking about projects that require 3,000 to 4,000 square feet of material, where everything needs to be a certain level and it needs to be a certain look, it's much easier to drive to Danby, Vermont, even though some people, think they need to fly there, than it is to go to a place like Italy. Obviously, it's not as attractive, myself included. I would rather go to Italy than Danby, Vermont. But when it comes down to it, logistically speaking, it's just a much easier sale. Now, over the years, also because people see it, you can have a lot more clients that will say, well, and just like yourself, John, you saw the Danby somewhere, and that's what intrigued your interest. So when it comes down to it, you do have the ability, we have more exposure on the East Coast. And realistically speaking too, if I was to sort of draw a line from Chicago down to Dallas, coming east, we're very strong. On the other side of the country, we're not as strong because people don't have the, as easy access, and there's not as much exposure as there is on the East Coast.
The one thing I've learned is that it's harder, less absorption, harder, more durable than a lot of us think. And we're getting bad information when we show up and they say, you can't use this in your kitchen or wherever.
Yep.
We haven't really talked much about price. I just flashed up on the screen a moment ago, the stone that I bought, and my recollection is that it was $8,000 for that piece of Danby marble. It's 9 feet long. I believe that's 4 feet wide. And I liked the fact that it looked like water washing up, washing across. So it had a wave pattern in it. One thing you've told me is that this is becoming out of favor, that people want more white, less veining. Is that true?
Well, it's a teeter-totter at this point, if you would. We do have clients that are now, so if I take it, let's say time period from 2016, 2017 to right about 21, 22, absolutely. Everybody was looking for the cleanest material. They were looking for the whitest material with the least amount of movement to it. I think now people are realizing that is kind of like purchasing a painting and having a white canvas, like
That's true.
literally nothing on it. So now they're coming back and saying, well, wait a minute, I like the interest. And just like you, John, some people are coming and saying, well, I like the fact that it has the veining to it, that it has the movement to it. And I think that's just now coming back into play where people are realizing, well, yes, we can have a lot more movement to the material. It doesn't have to be as quote unquote clean and with less veining. So for example, I mean, it's hard to tell from the picture, but is your material 2 inches thick?
I believe it is. Yes.
Yes. So that's the other thing that you had to remember. It will definitely drive the price up. If you're going thicker, the more material you're purchasing, the higher the price will be. Also, the $8,000 mark you're speaking of, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the finished product.
Right.
Yes.
So
And
there
it has a
also,
sink in it.
and so there's a very important part to remember something. You paid $8,000 for the piece to be quarried, cut from a block into a slab, transported to a distributor, to a fabricator, excuse me, had someone come out to your home, measure and template your space, cut the material to size, and then they put a finished edge on the entire island. So there's a lot of hands that touched that piece before it got to you at that price point. So yes, it could get very expensive, but also keep in mind there's other options as well. And as I believe Scott was mentioning earlier, there are other alternatives as well that are not as expensive. But obviously, I'll give you a perfect example. That $8,000 will probably cost you about, I would say, 14 to 15 today. I'm assuming yours was a couple of years ago.
I drive a hard bargain, very hard bargain.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
So do you or Joe have any really great stories about that include marble, either really crazy uses for marble or really big jobs, or I don't know.
I can tell you 1,000,001 stories. That might be a whole show in its own, but I'll tell you that, Danby's been used for many different projects and just a variety of items. Forget about the little knickknacks, the kitchen knives or, handles and cutting boards and things to that effect. That's a whole different ballpark. But you do have, for example, we had pieces just recently put into a museum just as showpieces. Somebody wanted just to have a couple of pieces from our facility, just raw material to display in their setting. I told you earlier, I get marble emergencies. Oh
Yes.
no, what happened? I had a customer call me a couple of weeks ago. They said, well, I don't know how the installer installed the Olympian White Select and there's a stain on it, but it wasn't there when they installed it. Well, I understand that, but we haven't touched anything. We haven't even moved in yet. After digging in and everything else, we came to a conclusion today that their children had a party, had pizza, left the pizza boxes on the counter. The
Oh.
oil from the pizza seeped through the box onto the counter and into the stone. Now, as I was saying before, if you clean it up, not a big deal at all. However, if you're going to leave it go away, yes, it will stain your counter.
Now, what
So,
can they do
luckily-
about that now? Because they're probably
So
pretty.
they're actually pretty bummed about it, but we're having this restoration company that's going out and it's basically going to hone because again, as I said earlier, the beauty of the material too is the fact that you can refinish it. So whatever seeped into the stone could only go a couple millimeters. It can't go through the entire 1.25 inch surface. So the refinisher was there today. They were actually going to hone down the piece and then they're going to apply poultice to it and reseal it and rehone it.
Can we talk
For
about
themselves.
onyx? Is onyx marble?
Technically, no.
Yeah, it's a specialty. It's almost as if,
It's a category of its own.
And
yeah,
onyx comes, I've seen some onyx that looks nothing like something else. So what is it? And where does it come from?
Well,
a lot of
it comes from all over the world.
the world, yeah.
Some are from Egypt, some are from,
Turkey,
Saudis. I mean, Turkey. It's just a
Expensive?
different,
Greece.
yes. Very expensive. What makes an onyx is, or visually, is you can see that it's A, colorful, very colorful, and B, it's translucent.
Right, you can backlight it, which people love. And a nice place for onyx is behind bars. They backlight it, and it's incredible because onyx is also, again, can stain and scratch, and it's soft. It's just like what we've discussed all along. However, it's an incredible looking material that will highlight the back of an area, especially when I've seen it on bars. Backlit. It's beautiful.
Remember, Roberto sells $41 million townhouses. His
So it's
clients
perfect.
require something a little more extra than the rest.
So,
of them.
Roberto,
But that's what
Roberto, just
Scott
remember
and
one
Pete are
thing.
installing in these houses.
well, just remember one thing, Roberto. It is the softest of the materials in the market.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes. So onyx is great for, as Joe was mentioning, bar tops, bathrooms, vanities, no big deal. Once you start putting on the kitchen countertops, you're just asking for nothing but
How
problems.
about that quartzite that we heard about earlier? That's a harder version of marble, you said.
Correct. Quartzites are harder. They're a deeper deposit, if you would. They're just bonded better. There's probably hundreds of quartzites on the market, and Joe's more familiar with them all because I kind of
Right.
concentrate on the Danby, but there are
Yeah,
plenty of
we're known-
quartzites out of Brazil.
We're definitely known for our particular company, not for granites, but quartzites and marbles. And quartzites are definitely popular for many kitchen applications. However, you're not going to find a lot of light quartzites. As a matter of fact, these are my quartzites. All this row here are all filled with quartzites. From a lot of them, a good 80 to 90% are from Brazil. And this is what we show people, and a lot of it have been selected to do countertops as well for kitchens. And they're all 1.25 inch thick. Marble, I have a variety of 3/4 and 1.25 inch because they use for both kitchen and bathroom applications. And you want 3/4 for wall applications, flooring, because it's thinner. And for obviously backsplash use as well.
For my marble or my quartzite, can I miter it and get like that 3 and 4 inch look?
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Is that what people are doing? Is that in style now to have a 4 inch, what looks like a 4 inch slab of white marble in my kitchen?
It all comes down to yeah, if you want it, you can make it as thick as you like. Whether it's 2 inch, a lot of it, I'll show you a sample real quick.
I
This
think
is what-
Scott Hobbs, you showed me that in Pound Ridge, I think 6 months ago. They put in a particularly thick. And I said, is this really this thick or is it mitered? I
mitered.
forget the answer. Was it real?
Joe's right.
It's mitered, right, Scott?
Absolutely. I mean, otherwise it's like you need the whole steel infrastructure underneath it, and even then it'll.
Plus, we don't import anything really that's 2 inches or thicker. It's got to be a special order. We import 1.25 inches, and that's what gets mitered. I just want to show you a quick picture of Italy. That's the quarry, and it's all exterior being chopped. That's Carrera right there. So unlike, and as you can see, the tractors, it's a huge, it kind of gets, you lose your breath when you look at it going up because it's like a top got cut off. But I just wanted to show you the picture in terms of how quarries are in Italy.
Well, this was tremendous. I think we're going to have to wrap it up. I'd like your closing thoughts on this. I learned a lot about the durability of marble and the geography of marble today, and who's selecting it, and the importance of brand names like Danby in Vermont. What did you learn, Roberto?
It just the chain of from quarry to the house. It's interesting, and there's a lot of people that are putting their hands on this, and there's a lot of decision making, and it's a process for sure.
Thank you, Peter. Any closing remarks?
No, just don't be afraid to use marble. No matter what you learn, John, don't be afraid. Just live with it.
Can I come up there and wander around your quarry and pick out my block?
We won't let you wander around.
All right, guys, sorry to interrupt. I had to cut you off there because we went way over. We're going to get this uploaded, and we'll try and make it sound a little better for the close. You guys have a great week.
Okay,
Thank
you can
you.
close this wherever you need to. Thanks. We're gonna
All right, take
we're
care.
gonna keep talking.
If we follow Joe around, we're going to lose like 5 pounds. He's been walking for an hour.
I
This
know.
is my exercise on a daily basis. I walk about 10,000 steps a day, and I still have a hard time losing weight. Maybe it's the pasta that I eat with my mother.
So if you have a couple more minutes, I do have a few more questions. One thing that's really important, and maybe Pete or Scott can add to this, is sustainability. You mentioned sustainability in your remarks to me earlier, Peter. What does that mean, sustainability? You're extracting the same 250,000 cubic feet every year, or are you taking more out of the mountain every year? It can't be replaced. What does it mean to have sustainable practices, and does it matter?
So it does matter a lot. I think with the architects and designers, especially now, they're looking for more and more product to be green. Now, John, in all honesty, I don't really know. To me, sustainability is much different to other people, meaning to me, it's something that you're actually able to reuse. Unfortunately, whether we want to admit it or not, whether your client is $100,000 home or $5 million home, if they're changing a kitchen countertop, whether it's stone or whether it's they're throwing it out. There is no replacing it.
Right.
However, we're sustainable, and in the way we're sustainable, or our sustainable practices are how we obtain the material. So to produce a stone, generally, you have a quarry from where you're taking a block, you're transporting that block via truck, and then in some cases even boat, to get to a block yard, from where it's then purchased to be cut into slabs, from where then it's taken and being transported again to a distributor like Everest. Whereas Danby, we're picking it up a mile down the road, not even 3/4 of a mile, with basically a loader, bringing it into our facility and cutting it right on spot. Now, in addition to that, we don't buy any water because we collect our own water, we recycle our water, and then of course we recycle the material that is left over from the material itself. We cut down on the power a lot by basically upgrading machinery on a regular basis. Number one. Number two, making sure that those machines have regulators, because obviously if you're trying to start up a gang saw, which is cutting 60 to 70 slabs at a time, it's going to eat up a lot of juice for that initial power. And we like to make sure that the power grid doesn't go black while we're trying to cut a piece of marble. And then the other thing we're doing is we're repurposing some of those areas where we took the marble out by storing other material or by placing material rather than crushing it and dumping it or just dumping over the foothills, if you would. We're putting material back into those caves and those holes.
Interesting. All right. And how about you, Joe? Are people asking about sustainable? Are they asking about the fuel of getting this stuff from Brazil and versus Vermont?
Absolutely not.
I
They don't
figured.
talk about it at all.
They just want what
come-
they want.
They want what they want, John, and they come here and they've done a lot of homework, by the way, because of the way everything can be Googled and on internet. So they come educated and they search and they come to look for what they may have found doing their homework. So nothing's ever discussed about that at all when customers come in. Not that I know of. I've been doing this for a while and nobody's really brought that up at all. So no.
Well,
I
as
mean-
Grace Farms taught me, people are starting to take an interest in where the materials come from. And when they try and get LEED certified, for instance, they're trying to understand, what is the energy required to get it here? Are we trying to source locally? And are we trying to get renewable forests? So I think it's coming. I think people are starting to ask those questions, and maybe they'll start asking at Everest Marble when they
Will.
wonder.
You're right. Anything can happen tomorrow. Another day.
All right,
Yeah.
you want to take us out, Roberto?
No, I am so happy to have learned a little bit more about just the geology of some of these different places and the fact that look, you can do absolutely anything. You just have to do it properly. And you have to protect it but you can keep it forever. I do find that in a lot of these places that I show that there are places that people have really overdone, and the beauty really is in the eye of the beholder, because you have people that come in and say, this is really gorgeous, but there's no way that I can keep it. So they spend a whole, they up the cost because, they're going to redo their bathroom for $100,000. So, it's really in the eye of the beholder. There's a guy in my building on the 3rd floor has this amazing, his backsplash has this amazing stripe through it. And I guarantee you it was just a piece that no one else wanted. And he was like, I love it. And I literally remember during Halloween, because everybody was going to every door. And I said, you got to go see Charles's apartment. I got to show you the backsplash. And she was like, wow. So, it's all very unique.
That was great, Roberto. Okay, thank you, everybody. Sorry for keeping you a few minutes extra, but I thought it was fascinating conversation. I've always wondered where these marbles come from and how they get to us. So thank you for, explaining.
No,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you.
Thank you
John.
guys for having
Thanks
us.
so much.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, John.
Have a great day, guys.
See you next Thursday. Bye.
Bye.